and welcome to Man's Model Moments. Today I'm taking a look at this kit from ICM. The Kfz.70 with MG34 in 1/35th scale. Technically this is actually the Horch 108 Type 40, and it's a 2015 original tool from ICM with new parts for the MG34 and mount. Taking off the glossy outer cover and opening the sturdy inner flip-top box, we can see that all of the plastic is contained in one of ICM's usual resealable bags. The transparencies and tyres inside are further separately bagged to keep them safe, however. The instructions are in standard ICM booklet form with the box art at the top, together with the short description and the colour guide keyed to ICM paints. The inner covers show the usual layout of all of the different sprue frames, as well as the tyres and transparencies. Construction starts with the engine, as is often the case with ICM vehicles, with everything being laid out in the usual clear isometric 3D drawings we're used to. At the end of the comprehensive instructions, we get the two full colour painting guides, though with this type of general purpose vehicle you're really only limited by your imagination. The small decal sheet is typical ICM fare, well printed with perfect registration and good colour density. You get instrument dials, number plates and some unit badges, but there's not much else possible for these sorts of vehicles. Moving to the plastic, you can see straight away from the first of these sprues that there's a lot included here. As is common with these smaller vehicles, the chassis is a single piece, which is welcome. You then get a plethora of other parts. These range from the seats with their subtle but nice contoured effects, to very delicate parts like these chassis parts or the seat frames. The main parts of the kit body are much more robust, and you get delicate detail on each of these. You can see how the front grille has separate slats here, whereas other detail is part of the surface. There are a lot of including accessories here in the form of a number of nicely moulded Mauser rifles and tools. Together with some very fine casting, these are the brake lines for the car here. There's also good protection for things like the steering wheel. The doors and the folded roof all have great surface detail, with that on the doors being on both inner and outer faces. You get two identical frames for the wheel hubs, covering inner and outer pieces for each wheel and the spare. This is the new frame for the MG34, which is nicely cast, as well as the anti-aircraft mount for it. This does have the lightning holes filled in, but if they weren't, these parts would be too delicate to assemble. You can always drill them out if you wish. The 5 tyres are all vinyl, have a decent tread, and a decent balance of flexibility versus firmness. The transparent frame is pretty small, with headlights and windscreen included. These are, however, of excellent clarity, as we've come to expect from ICM. The build starts, as many of ICM's vehicle kits do, with the engine. this is a nice little assembly that progresses well with no vices. Though the latter stages and components are a little fiddly. Next is the main chassis, where we start with a couple of inner pieces that do need some care to seat properly. When they're in the right place it's obvious, however, and the fit is very snug. There are some more pieces to go on that again are a little fiddly, like this one, as well as several cross braces which present no problem at all. The transmission and axles are next, and these assemblies need to be worked with carefully because the axle unions are pretty delicate. The assembly itself is no problem, though you do need to ensure the cover plate that goes on the face is properly seated, and because of those delicate axle connections, I found a pair of mini pliers worked well here. These assemblies can then be put onto the chassis, and they attach very positively in place, and then can be locked in with chassis pieces. Just ensure you put these in from the correct side. We then have the wheel hubs and the lower suspension frames. Be careful of alignment here as these only go on one way. Now again, some of the pieces we need to put on the chassis are pretty fiddly, either because of their size, orientation, access, or a combination of all three, as I am demonstrating here. It's not that the fit of the parts here is bad, quite the contrary, just that it's complex. That's emphasised here with the front transmission and steering assembly. This piece fits beautifully when you get it into position, but getting it there requires some study of the instructions and concentration. Putting the cover on afterwards likewise requires a fair bit of manual dexterity. You'll also need a fair bit of that when making some of the smaller parts, like these suspension springs. Again, not difficult, just fiddly. An easier step is putting on the supporting struts for the car body, though you do need to be mindful that they align properly to give a 90-degree angle, or you'll run into issues later. Those suspension springs can then go on, and these are a very positive fit. Next we have the wheel hubs, which as you can see here is another operation that requires some care and dexterity, especially at the front where the steering arms also fit into the hubs. As I said earlier too, if you've not aligned these carefully before, your wheels aren't going to be straight here. We then move on to completing the suspension assemblies with the upper suspension arms. These require a slightly awkward piece on the chassis first, followed by the arm itself. Now these create quite a strong assembly when complete, but they do require everything to be perfectly aligned to do so, or you're going to find this problematic. As such, I'd recommend doing everything from the lower suspension arms to this step without taking any breaks, because it'll give you some room for adjustment before everything is completely set. Now if you thought fiddly bits were over, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we have some delicate pieces on the chassis. Before coming to the most delicate pieces on the kit, the brake lines. These are incredibly fragile one-piece items that connect into two hubs and the chassis. I broke mine several times, and you may want to replace these with wire. It's now time to bring the engine onto the chassis, which is a simple and pain-free operation that's welcome after so many delicate operations. After that, we can also add the fuel tank, another easy one. Then we're back to delicate assemblies with the exhaust. Again, this isn't complex, it's just delicate because of the scale sizes here. Take your time and it goes fine. The fitting of the exhaust is a matter of making sure the routing is correct before you start. The rear goes under the rear chassis but over the drive shaft before routing under the body supports. Get this right and the rest is both easy and a testament to ICM's design and engineering, since it aligns perfectly with all of the connection points, including the distant engine, which is amazing. Time to get your tweezers out again for the next pieces. I'm not sure what they are, but they're fiddly and there's a lot of them, 2 per wheel. They're a bit of the pain in the proverbial, but just soldier on. Keep the tweezers handy as you're then adding hooks to the bumper, which can then be mated onto the main chassis. The only challenge here being not to knock the towing hooks that you've just put on. With that we can move on to the main body, and the first job is to take out any pent-up frustrations on the kit by drilling a hole in it. This is for the later edition of the MG mount, of course. Next are some of the tiniest parts of the kit, the foot pedals, and this is the moment when my tweezers pinged one of them into the ether. Undeterred, I struggled to mount the other one, and as you can see, this is a bit of a faff. After searching for the lost piece, I decided to craft a new one, adding a tiny actuator and then shaping another tiny 1x2mm pedal and painfully adding it. After a lot of work, the end result isn't bad. Of course, I then immediately found the lost pedal on the instructions, so just be careful with these tiny parts. Fortunately, the next step was putting on the sides of the car, parts that you can actually hold with your hands, and that present no problem in fitting perfectly. The front firewall is next, with similar ease of construction. Then we're back to tweezers again to add more internal pieces, though these are relatively painless. Adding this assembly to the chassis is a very positive fit, you just need to be careful not to knock all those tiny pieces you've attached, like those pedals. Front wheel arches are also a perfect fit, and it's these kinds of things that really show the technical accomplishments of a kit like this. Next, the seat and trim pieces are added to the rear bulkhead, and then this can be added to the body. Again, a flawless fit. Likewise, the addition of the doors on the rear is simple, and the fit here is once again exemplary, fitting perfectly. Yet again, the most complex part of this is the addition of the rear cargo door handle, the most critical part being ensuring you don't lose the part. There's then a few pieces to add to the underside of the main body, but all of these are very straightforward with nothing to trip you up. Now I just want to take a moment to thank all of you who have supported me directly through YouTube memberships and Patreon. This really does keep the channel going, and without you it would be very difficult for me to be able to continue doing this. Now if you're only just seeing your name on here for the first time, it's because I update this monthly, and if I've prepared some videos ahead of time, then there may still have the old list on, even if the list has been updated since then. Don't worry though, your name will get on the list and will continue to appear throughout your support. If you are considering supporting me, YouTube channel membership is by far the easiest way to do this, since Patreon is becoming a more challenging platform to engage with. Whichever you choose, however, I absolutely appreciate your contributions, and don't forget to come and check out the private members Discord, which you get access to at any level. Right, let's get back to fiddly bits. All the car's control columns are added here, and again, tweezers are essential. This bracing piece is very delicate, and I managed to break it removing it from the sprues. It does have, however, very positive locating lugs in the floor and sides of the body, meaning that it's actually not a difficult job to put this in place and then repair it. These rifle braces are very delicate, but actually go on pretty well with decent attachment tabs on each side. Back to the chassis to put on a couple of steps. And then the instructions call for the wheels, with the tyres going on and then the outer hubs cementing to the inner, and they're keyed for a positive fit. I'm not actually going to do this step now, waiting until after painting, but I'll show you here how it should look. Next is the construction of the rear-facing bench seat, which looks delicate, but is actually a pretty easy build due to positive location of all the parts. It's a relatively solid assembly when complete, and it looks great. The two front seats are a little more fiddly, but again, good locating areas and precise fit means they just need dexterity and care to build up. Fitting the bench seats into the back is simple, again due to very positive locating lugs in the car floor. Likewise, the front seats locate easily, with the main thing to watch out for being snagging the small parts in the car interior, which is why I'm using tweezers again. With all the seats in, however, you can really see this coming along now. The windscreen simply clips in place and then can be cemented to lock it in when you wish. Each of the doors has both internal and external handles to add, and one also has this document pouch. Again, fiddly, but not problematic. Now we come to a really important part, joining the chassis and the body. This does require some care and attention, and it's worth dry fitting this in advance to ensure everything goes well. I found I needed to really pay attention to where everything was located here. You need to make sure that parts receive cement and have good adhesion as you go along, which does take a bit of adjustment, alignment and pressure, which is not helped at all by all the fiddly bits that you just put on the other side of the body. When everything is in place, you should have no gap at the rear of the chassis, which is a good measure to use for fit. This clip is actually at 6 times speed and is over a minute long, meaning that this step took over 6 minutes, and this was after 2 dry fittings. If I were going to build this kit again, which I well may, I think I would fit the base of the car to the chassis much earlier on. I don't think it would have any effect on putting on the body pieces and would make everything much easier. Anyway, the chassis also needs the gearbox and driveshaft assembly making, which is a simple 2-piece affair. Adding it to the chassis though requires a bit more fiddly manipulation, though once again, when it's in place, it's solid. And then we can lock it in with another cross member. The steering column can then be added, sliding up into the body and attaching positively to a lug on the chassis below the engine. Adding the radiator assembly to the main grille is straightforward, though you may want to paint these ahead of time. The grille can then be attached to the body, with the main thing to watch out for here being the routing of the cooling pipes, as it's easy to catch these under the radiator fan lip, but once again it's a good fit when in place. The bonnet can now be put on, though I chose to leave it off and just use it here to ensure the alignment of the front grille, as I'll be opening mine up. The folded back cover is another simple assembly which again has nothing to trip you up. The instructions have you adding doors now, but again I'm not going to do this as this is for a diorama and I want some of them open. So it's back to adding that folded cover, which clips into place nicely and can be secured with cement. We now have a host of little gribbly bits that I'm going to speed run through. All of these require care and dexterity, but aren't otherwise problematic. First are the headlights, which I'm leaving the lenses off until after painting. These are the rather odd looking side mirrors. Here are the locking lugs for the windscreen, probably one of the smallest parts on the kit. And these are the width indicators. We then come to the unique parts for this boxing with the assembly of the MG34. This, like much of the build of the smaller and finer parts of this kit, is somewhat fiddly in places, requiring care but fitting well. Once complete, it can be mounted in the body and we can see the finished model. This is a really nice kit, but it's definitely not for everyone. For a small vehicle, it's very involved, and it has a lot of very small and fine parts which some will feel frustrated by. Overall, the fit of everything is excellent, and testament to ICM's design and engineering precision. Out of the box, you can make a really superb little replica of this very widely used vehicle. Here's a picture of Rommel in one in North Africa, just as an example. A super detailer will find that there's a fantastic base here to build up from. The one thing I would have liked to have seen in the kit that's not there is a two-piece engine cover with internal detail, so that you could easily pose it open and show all that lovely engine detail, because otherwise all of that work is unseen. That's a minor grumble though, and anyone interested in doing this will likely be adding to the kit anyway, and this won't present much of a barrier. Overall then, this is a fantastic and challenging kit that I wouldn't hesitate to recommend to any intermediate modeller. That's all for this instalment of Man's Model Moments. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel for more like it, and share this video with others you think would also enjoy it. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and if you're feeling generous then I also have a Patreon, which is absolutely the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like this. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.